Return the man! Return that which belongs to...
This boy, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, has an IQ of 210. Every day, he studies the loopholes of the earth and plays hide-and-seek with God. God finally couldn't endure it any longer. He was blinded by anger. He declared his intention to destroy humanity. After receiving the order, Poseidon had to comply. What abilities does this boy possess that can provoke God? Is human civilization really going to be destroyed because of this? This all starts with a certain treasure. The boy Kevin is obsessed with historical research. His greatest hobby is studying the civilizations of world history. His room is filled with artifacts and figurines from various countries. Even on his birthday, he rejected his parents' idea of throwing a party. Instead, he asked them to take him to see Stonehenge. Although this seemed very boring to his family, Kevin was very satisfied with this birthday gift. Kevin's obsession with history makes him stand out among his peers. However, this also means that few people can truly understand his inner world. Even his family often overlooks his feelings. Yet even so, Kevin still didn't change his mind. His heart is both lonely and romantic. That night, he accidentally opened the wardrobe in his room. But to his surprise, what appeared before his eyes was another world. Kevin walked in with a look of shock on his face. However, as soon as he stepped onto the land of this other world, he saw a group of soldiers not far away, chasing a Viking pirate running towards him. At first, Kevin thought they were filming a movie, so he politely raised his hand to greet them. But the next second, an arrow shot into the ground beside his foot. Kevin then realized he was not dreaming. He immediately ran towards the wardrobe door behind him, but to his surprise, the pirate actually followed him back into the room. They blocked the wardrobe door tightly. Both Kevin and the pirate looked bewildered. Kevin hurried downstairs to seek help from his parents. However, they didn't take him seriously. After all, Kevin often had some unconventional ideas. His father impatiently interrupted him, dismissing it as just a dream. He would be back to normal after a good sleep. He looked at his parents, who were glued to the TV screen. Kevin could only helplessly return to his room. At this point, the other world inside the wardrobe had vanished. Looking at the pirate in front of him, Kevin suddenly asked about Viking history. But due to the language barrier, the pirate remained silent.
What the heck is that?
Kevin was shocked by the scene before him. He looked at the Viking pirate. He excitedly expressed his desire to explore with him. Before he left, he made sure to say goodbye to his parents. Then he dashed towards the wall. Kevin crashed into it, giving himself a concussion. When he regained consciousness, his parents wanted to talk to Kevin. Previously, they were unwilling to interfere with their son's hobbies. Now, they felt that Kevin had become obsessed. They advised him to put down his history books. Rather than being absorbed in things that had already passed, it would be better to embrace technology and move towards the future. However, Kevin firmly believed in what he had seen and heard. He couldn't understand why his parents were unwilling to believe him. He refused to take their advice. Thus, their first conversation ended. That night, Kevin shone a flashlight on the wardrobe, but the wardrobe door showed no change. He could only turn off the light and prepare for bed. However, the next second, a sound suddenly came from the wardrobe. Then a group of strange people pushed the door open and entered. Kevin hurriedly turned on the light. The 5 people before him were dressed very strangely. Seeing that there was only one child in the room, they breathed a sigh of relief. They took out a map and began discussing their plans. From their words, Kevin learned that the 5 were a group of thieves. However, what they had stolen wasn't ordinary gold and silver treasures, but rather a treasure belonging to God. The map in their hands recorded all the entrances and exits to the time-space passages. To evade God's pursuit, the 5 fell into a time-space passage. They opened a door and ended up in Kevin's room. It seemed that the wardrobe was also one of the entrances. Just as Kevin wanted to learn more, a sudden explosion was heard from the wardrobe. The wardrobe door was forcibly opened. God suddenly appeared in the room. He demanded the thieves hand over the treasure. Although the 5 were scared, they still refused to return the map in their hands. God's anger was skyrocketing. A thief immediately signaled his companion to push the wall behind them. That was also an exit recorded on the map. Next, a miraculous scene occurred. The wall was pushed down, revealing a time-space passage behind it. The thieves jumped into it. Kevin was also very tempted at this moment. After hesitating for a moment, he ultimately chose to jump into the passage. And so, Kevin's time-space adventure officially began. After a series of time jumps, they landed on a large ship. They saw the boy who came with them. After a brief moment of surprise, the thieves ignored him. After all, the most important thing now was to figure out what era and location they were in. Kevin looked around. when he saw the pirate flag fluttering in the distance, and the woman in ancient costume standing at the bow of the ship. He immediately realized that they were in Macau in 1810. At this moment, the female pirate Jean Yaseo was in a final showdown with the British Navy. Kevin became excited. He shared this piece of history with the thieves, but at this moment, the crew discovered the intruders, and launched a fierce attack on them. Kevin was caught off guard and injured by a crossbow bolt. However, he didn't feel any pain. Thus, he was even more convinced that his father was right. This was just a dream. In the midst of the chaos, he followed the thieves into a cabin on the ship, but unexpectedly, this wasn't the entrance to the time-space passage. He looked at the room full of gold and silver treasures. The thieves' instincts kicked in, but at this moment, the cannon fire outside gradually subsided. Then Jean Yaseo entered the cabin with her subordinates. She had an angry expression, seemingly questioning something. However, Kevin could not understand it all. But then he was amazed to discover that the thieves could communicate with Jean Yaseo without any barriers. Could they also speak Cantonese? Perhaps noticing Kevin's confusion, the thieves placed a translation hat on his head. To his surprise, this action saved everyone's lives. Seeing the vigilant Jean Yaseo, Kevin stepped forward. He used his knowledge of history, and suggested that Jean Yaseo immediately change course, to head towards the nearby shallow waters. This way, they could take advantage of the pirate ship's shallow draft, to successfully avoid the British Navy's encirclement. Although Jean Yaseo had some doubts about Kevin's identity, time was of the essence. She decided to take the risk and give it a try. She didn't expect that this method would actually work. The fleet successfully escaped the enemy's capture. Jean Yaseo praised Kevin's cleverness highly. She urged him to stay and be her strategist. However, Kevin replied, he was just familiar with this part of history. The solution was actually something Jean Yaseo had come up with herself. He merely expedited the process. Fortunately, at this moment, the thieves also found the time-space passage. Kevin hurriedly followed them and jumped into the sea. The next second, they landed on a patch of grass. After what had just happened, the thieves looked at Kevin with newfound respect. They thought he could predict the future, so they looked at Kevin, hoping he could help them find the location of the treasure. However, Kevin stated, he didn't have the ability to predict the future. He only knew the history of the past. Upon hearing this, the thieves lost interest. They lacked the motivation to continue bringing Kevin along. But since the new passage would open the next day, the thieves decided to wander around to see if there were any treasures they could take. At this moment, Kevin suddenly exclaimed. He had actually seen the construction site of Stonehenge. For a history enthusiast, this was a priceless treasure. Perhaps he could unravel the mysteries that had puzzled people for centuries. Kevin ran to the overseers and asked them why they were building Stonehenge, but the truth left him greatly disappointed. This wasn't the celestial map he had imagined at all. Instead, it was just a project the ancients built to pass the time. In addition to Stonehenge, they also built timber circles, straw circles, and stone circles. It turned out that the formation of Stonehenge was so arbitrary. At night, everyone sat around the campfire chatting. Kevin was very curious about the background of the thieves group, so the leader Pello introduced the identities of the members to him. The five were originally not thieves but employees under God. They had stolen the time map. They were preparing to quit and go out to steal treasures, but this act also angered God. He sent out a relentless pursuit to find them. Fortunately, without the guidance of the time map, it was not easy for God to find them. Moreover, each of them possessed extraordinary abilities, such as telepathy, disguise, strength, and so on. Then they discussed the next theft operation. However, Kevin expressed his disagreement, especially since most of the items the thieves wanted to steal were of archaeological value. Kevin's accusations and resistance made the thieves very upset. They immediately decided to send him home the next day. Meanwhile, the Demon King in Hell also learned about the theft of the time map. He was very pleased. He couldn't steal treasures from God, so he thought he could still take it from a few thieves. As long as he got hold of the time map, his dream of unifying the world would surely come true. As he fantasized about his evil universe, his subordinate brought more good news. He told the Demon King that God had found the location of the thieves. The location was at Kevin's home. The Demon King ordered the huntress Fiona to seize the time map. The next day, the new time passage opened. Kevin followed the thieves into the entrance, but unexpectedly, he didn't return to his bedroom as the thieves had hoped. Instead, he found himself in ancient Greece with them. Kevin stood on a hill, gazing at the distant buildings. He actually saw the Trojan horse with his own eyes. Pello was also very excited. because the giant wooden horse was what they intended to steal. After nightfall, they arrived at the city gate and began to discuss the wooden horse. They discussed how to steal it. Someone suggested dismantling the horse into pieces and then transporting it in batches. However, this idea was immediately rejected by Kevin. He pointed out that Greek soldiers were hidden inside the horse. This was the famous Trojan War in history. Listening to Kevin's words, the thieves group lost all interest. Their first theft was off to a bad start. Pelo was in a terrible mood. She told her partner Wagia to quickly find a new passage. However, at this moment, the soldiers inside the horse could no longer endure it. They opened the small door at the back legs. They urged the visitors to hurry inside the horse. Otherwise, if the soldiers inside the city noticed something unusual, they would likely be exposed. Kevin finally saw the structure inside the horse. The level of craftsmanship amazed him. At this moment, some soldiers were questioning the battle plan. Would anyone really be willing to bring a wooden horse into the city? However, Kevin confirmed the plan. After all, this was a well-documented part of history. But unexpectedly, the soldiers guarding the city watched the wooden horse that had been outside the gate for a day and decided to light it up. Everyone was suddenly in a panic. Could this time travel end so abruptly? Pelo was immediately filled with despair. However, Kevin comforted her. "This is just a dream," he said. "But is it really?" As the flames grew larger, the Greek soldiers decided to emerge from the horse to fight the Trojans to the death. However, the next second, an officer from inside the city suddenly appeared. He was captivated by the exquisite wooden horse. He quickly ordered his men to extinguish the fire and to bring the giant wooden horse into the city. History finally continued along the correct trajectory. After confirming their safety, Kevin and the thieves stepped out of the wooden horse. Pelo couldn't help but scold Kevin for putting everyone in danger. However, Kevin believed that this was all recorded in history books. No matter what, the outcome wouldn't change. But is the reality really as he said? In Pelo's view, a group of people not recorded in history, traveling through time to a crucial historical moment. Even a small action could potentially alter the trajectory and course of history. However, at this moment, Kevin still thought he was dreaming. Thus, he paid no attention to Pelo's concerns. So, the group decided to temporarily split up. Pelo decided to steal something valuable with her team before finding the next passage. Meanwhile, Kevin stayed in place waiting for them to return. Just as the thieves left, a young girl approached Kevin. She claimed to be cursed, but she could see the future. Kevin pondered for a moment. He recognized that the girl before him was Cassandra, a Trojan princess with the gift of prophecy. But isn't she someone who only appears in myths? Kevin was instantly confused. Is this really true history? Or is it actually an ancient mythical world? In the subsequent conversation, Cassandra suddenly spoke of a prophecy about Kevin. He would experience more fantastic journeys with the thieves group and create many wonderful memories. But she also warned Kevin that he must stay with the thieves group from then on, because in the future, they would together save the world. Just as Kevin was feeling incredulous, the thieves returned with their spoils. They were preparing to take Kevin home. However, what they didn't know was that Kevin's home was facing an unprecedented crisis. A battle for the time map was quietly brewing in the darkness. Kevin never expected that he had only made a time jump, and when he returned, his home would be gone. Seeing the strangers in tattered clothing in the snow, hiding inside a thatched hut, Kevin was instantly stunned. This wasn't at all the home he remembered. However, the thieves group confidently stated that the coordinates they entered were correct. Then they waved goodbye to him. But looking at him, the thieves felt a bit guilty. So they recalled the details from before the time jump, and they found that they had indeed entered the correct coordinates, but the time node was wrong. 2 years later, Kevin's parents would settle here. Thus, Kevin once again embarked on a journey with the thieves. However, he didn't notice that, across the vast snowy plain, a large stone suddenly emitted a dazzling light, as if a pair of eerie eyes were awakening, and the coordinates were exactly where Kevin's future home would be. Accompanied by a thunderous roar, Kevin fell into a fantastical primeval jungle. Although he couldn't return to his familiar bedroom, Kevin was quite happy. He didn't want to end this beautiful dream so soon, so he promised the thieves group that he wouldn't be a burden to them, and that he would do his best to help the team. At this point, the thieves couldn't abandon him. They allowed Kevin to figure out the current era. Kevin turned and walked into the jungle. The thieves waited for his return. Unexpectedly, after crossing the jungle, there was a complex of buildings. By examining the craftsmanship and style of the houses, Kevin concluded that they had arrived in the era of the Maya civilization. Upon hearing this, the thieves speculated that there must be many valuable items here. However, Kevin informed them that history books recorded the Maya had a tradition of sacrificing living people to their gods, especially strangers were likely to become their sacrifices. Kevin thought the thieves would be cautious after hearing this, but unexpectedly, Pello merely told them to stay alert and to be careful during their actions. Then they continued towards the primitive tribe. However, the next second, they ran into the tribe's residence. Seeing the group of strangers in front of them, the tribe's guard immediately asked about their origins.
What I always say is a stranger is really just a friend you've never met.
Hearing this, the guard's expression grew increasingly serious. The thieves' hearts began to race. They remembered Kevin's words, that strangers would be captured as offerings. But unexpectedly, these Maya were different from the historical records. Not only did they not capture them for sacrifice, but they warmly welcomed them. After entering the tribe, the villagers offered them fruits and vegetables. This made the thieves gradually lower their guard. However, Kevin firmly believed the information in the history books. He thought the Maya would surely sacrifice them. Next, the guard led them into the palace where the queen resided. To these foreign strangers, the queen acted very warmly and inclusively. Not only did she not hold their rudeness against them, but she prepared a lavish feast to entertain them. At this moment, Pello was still thinking about how to steal treasures, but before that, they needed to fill their stomachs first. During the banquet, Kevin seized the opportunity to ask about the history of this era, planning to continue his research when he returned home. Meanwhile, Pello intentionally approached the guard, trying to extract information about the treasure's hiding place from him. However, she ultimately found nothing. Just when they thought this trip would end in failure, they didn't expect that. The queen personally brought them to the treasure vault, showing off the tribe's treasures. Most of them were luxurious and dazzling garments. The thieves' eyes lit up immediately. Taking advantage of the distraction, Pello easily swiped a piece of treasure, but Kevin saw her. He grabbed Pello's hand and returned the treasure to its place. Then he told her, the records in the history books were not wrong. The Maya would usually first feed the sacrifices, then dress them in luxurious garments, and finally take them to the top of the pyramid for the sacrifice ceremony. At this moment, the queen came to assist as well. She announced that she would take the guests to visit the top of the pyramid. Pello was immediately alarmed upon hearing this. She realized that what Kevin said was all true, so she hurriedly gathered her companions, and they quickly fled toward the next passage. However, at this moment, the passage had not yet opened. The group stood at the edge of the cliff, looking at each other in confusion. They were at a loss for what to do. They tried to swing across the cliff using the vines, but it was completely ineffective. At this moment, the guard had brought people to their backs. In desperation, they had to follow back to the pyramid. Watching the queen approach slowly with a dagger, the thieves immediately panicked and begged for mercy. But unexpectedly, the queen only wanted to peel fruits with the knife. It turned out that the Maya had no tradition of sacrificing living people at all. As for why such a notion existed, it should have been fabricated by other tribes to incite war. Kevin then let out a long sigh of relief. So this was the true history. After that, the group happily bid farewell to the queen. They held hands and jumped off the cliff. They were ready to head to the next time period. However, this time, it was the familiar bedroom. Kevin realized it was time to say goodbye to the thieves group. He sincerely thanked the thieves for taking him on a wonderful adventure. This would be unforgettable for him for a lifetime, and the thieves felt reluctant to part as well. But just then, a large stone outside the door suddenly exploded. The huntress Fiona emerged from it. She entered Kevin's home. Kevin's parents downstairs noticed something unusual and looked back. The next second, the couple was instantly burned into two charred pieces. Pello recognized this as the work of a demon. However, Kevin still didn't understand the situation. Were these two charred pieces his parents? At this moment, Fiona suddenly appeared, launching another fire attack. The group hurried back to the bedroom, trying to escape through the time portal in the wardrobe. He looked at the wardrobe emitting dazzling white light. Kevin decided to go back in time to save his parents. Thus, he once again followed the thieves into the portal. Meanwhile, Fiona arrived a step later. Looking at the dark wardrobe, fury gleamed in her eyes. On the other side, God returned to his heavenly base. Regarding the loss of the time map, he appeared particularly anxious and nervous, because if there was a mistake when using it, it would lead to temporal chaos, even causing irreparable paradoxes. So he announced his latest project to his assistant, which was currently the highest priority secret. Looking at the beautiful star map before him, God reminded them again to keep it confidential. All of this was observed by an employee nearby. Meanwhile, Kevin had already traveled through the time portal to the prehistoric era. This ancient jungle was fraught with danger. hiding fierce prehistoric creatures. The thieves had guessed Fiona's purpose, that the Demon King had sent her to seize the time map, so they didn't delay any longer, and immediately set out to find the next portal. But unexpectedly, they accidentally stirred up a pterosaur on the way. The group hurriedly ran toward the open portal. The next second, they fell into a new time period. However, Kevin didn't follow. Just when the thieves thought he had perished in the jungle, Kevin descended holding a dinosaur skull. Pello stepped forward to pay for the damage to the house. It was at this moment they realized that they were now in medieval Europe, which was also the famous period of the Black Death in history. The villagers, seeing the 6 people dressed unusually, immediately identified them as evil witches, and prepared to burn them at the stake as sacrifices. Fortunately, the dinosaur skull Kevin was dragging saved their lives. They transformed from evil witches into dragon-slaying warriors. The village chief even wanted to kill a few cats to celebrate for him, because in this era, cats were seen as embodiments of evil by the church. People could hunt them down, but in fact, it was precisely because cats were ruthlessly slaughtered that the city was overrun with rats, leading to a severe plague. However, the villagers didn't believe these claims at all. They warmly welcomed Kevin and his companions. They pleaded with the thieves to help them deal with the brutal lord. However, killing was not the thieves' style. Pello was about to refuse, when a voice came from outside the door. The newcomer was the lord's deputy. He had come with a group of soldiers to collect taxes. The village chief proudly stated that they were now protected by dragon-slaying warriors. The lord couldn't hope to extort food from them again. However, their numbers are small. The 6 of them were no match for a group of soldiers. The next second, they were thrown into the dungeon. However, this group of thieves was no ordinary band. They easily broke free from their chains. They returned to the village they had come from. Though they had successfully escaped, they could not turn a blind eye to the villagers' plight. So, they decided to use the legend of the evil witch to help the village rid itself of the lord's oppression. The next day, they created smoke in the village, and had the villagers drape themselves in white cloth to impersonate ghosts. Although these tricks intimidated the soldiers, they did not fool the lord. The next second, they were treated as evil witches and tied to a haystack. They were about to be burned alive. Kevin convinced the soldier in charge of lighting the fire, and even the lord's deputy was swayed by him. He resolved to become a good person, and did something significant. He pulled the brutal lord down from power. He took the coveted throne. Thus, Kevin and his companions narrowly escaped disaster. This land welcomed a new lord, but unexpectedly, the portal to the prehistoric world was still open, and the pterosaur that had once chased them had followed through the portal to this era. It wreaked havoc on the buildings in the area. Seeing this, Kevin and the thieves immediately ran for their lives. They intended to find the next portal, to escape into a new world and avoid the trouble. But at this moment, a large stone suddenly fell from above. The group thought it was just a cat that had accidentally knocked something down. The Demon King was watching them. He was trying to create an accident to kill them. At this moment, the huntress Fiona tracked Kevin's scent to ancient Greece. She sniffed the smell on the clothes. Then she confidently continued forward. But a closer look at the clothes in her hand revealed that they were not Kevin's at all. She had clearly picked up the wrong ones. So who was she actually tracking now? It turned out that Kevin's sister Elsa had also discovered the secret of the wardrobe. After noticing that her parents and brother were all missing, she entered the wardrobe alone, traveling through different worlds to search for her family. Her route was exactly the same as the time periods Kevin had traveled, and because Fiona had picked up the wrong clothes, she was now following Elsa in search of someone. Meanwhile, Kevin and his companions arrived in New York City in 1929. Here, they experienced the vibrant nightlife of the upper class, and witnessed the Great Depression in America firsthand. They also formed a small gang. The members were the 6 of them. They then engaged in the business of bootlegging meat and counterfeiting money. These 2 businesses made them a fortune, but it soon drew the ire of other gangs. They captured several of Kevin's companions, planning to throw them into the sea to feed the fish. Fortunately, Pello appeared just in time, promising that they would no longer sell mead. This successfully rescued their friends. After this lesson, the group decided not to stay any longer. They prepared to enter the next time period. Just as they were sitting around the campfire chatting, the giant stone skull representing God reappeared. But this time it was not God himself who arrived. Instead, it was the employee, who had eavesdropped on God's conversation. He shouted to the thieves group that God was concocting a terrifying plan. He urged them to quickly escape with the time map, and they must not return the map to God. The thieves group immediately pulled Kevin into the entrance of the new portal. But why did this employee eavesdrop on God and his assistant? What was his true purpose? Meanwhile, Fiona finally caught up with Elsa. However, she was quite professional. Seeing that Elsa was not the person she was looking for, she let her go. On the other side, Kevin entered a completely new time period again. At this moment, they were standing in a magnificent garden castle. From the architectural style and people's attire, it seemed to be the era of King George. In the evening, they attended a lavish court banquet. At the banquet, Kevin saw many famous figures from history books, but while they were enjoying the food and the dance, they were completely unaware that danger was approaching, because when they traveled through time, they always forgot to close the portal entrance. This caused temporal chaos. This situation was extremely dangerous, so the Temporal Investigation Bureau sent agents to track their whereabouts. Two dwarf investigators followed their trail. They discovered that the Demon Clan was also involved in this matter. They realized that things were going awry. They immediately quickened their investigation. At this time, Fiona also found out Kevin's whereabouts. Seeing the demons closing in, the six of them fled in haste. Fortunately, a new portal was just ahead. They rushed straight into it, but unexpectedly, what awaited them was neither soft grass, nor a mysterious tropical rainforest. Instead, beneath them was a swirling vortex of black mist. There was neither light nor air. Suffocation and fear enveloped the group. At this moment, several ropes emerged from the black mist and grabbed Judy, their teammate who could read minds. After an unknown amount of time, the group finally burst out of the black vortex, landing in a desert. After a brief celebration that they were still alive, they realized that Judy was already gone. Kevin wanted to go back to save her, but the group's map master Wage told him they had never encountered this situation before, and the map didn't mention such a scenario. Therefore, they had no idea how to resolve it. Considering the harsh desert climate, Pello decided not to wait any longer in place. They would first exit the desert and then figure out what to do. So Kevin left a directional arrow in the sand to guide Judy in the right direction. This arrow would bring him grave danger. After walking for an unknown amount of time, they finally encountered a busy caravan. After inquiring, they learned that this was the pilgrimage of Mansa. With this information, Kevin quickly pinpointed the historical coordinates to 14th century North Africa. Mansa was the king of the Mali Empire, and one of the richest people in the world at that time. This pilgrimage caravan was carrying a large amount of gold. Kevin shared a lot of historical background, but Pello only heard the word gold. She was itching to act. However, before they could take action, the king noticed the oddly dressed group. He mistook them for impoverished wanderers. He could not help but show pity. He gifted them a large pile of gold bars. Then he invited them to join the feast that evening. However, no one expected that, in just one night, they would lose another companion. Wage had intended to stargaze at night, but he unexpectedly fell asleep in the desert. When he woke up, the pilgrimage caravan had long vanished. Meanwhile, the king greatly enjoyed the stories Kevin told, so he treated him as a distinguished guest. He planned to take him to meet the king of Mecca, but unexpectedly, as soon as the two kings met, they erupted into a heated argument over who should kneel first. Seeing the two stubbornly refusing to give in, Kevin immediately gave King Mansa a suggestion. Since neither wanted to kneel first, why not do it together? Thus, the following scene unfolded. King Mansa immediately praised Kevin as a genius. Meanwhile, the missing Wage had also made his way to Mecca. After the group reunited, it was time to leave. Kevin bid farewell to King Mansa. He never expected that he would feel a fatherly love from a king that he had never experienced before. But he ultimately was not a person of this time period, and he still needed to find a way to go back and save his parents. Thus, the group set out once again, following Wage to a new portal. At this moment, Kevin noticed that the content in the history book had changed. The original pilgrimage of 6,000 people had turned into 6,005 people. The extra 5 were himself and the thieves. It turned out that they could truly change history. However, they had delayed for just a moment, and Kevin discovered that the entrance to the time portal had already closed. He stood in the desert in confusion, and there was no one around him. What on earth was happening? Why had the time portal closed so quickly this time? Kevin tentatively jumped a few times. The next second, he suddenly began to fall downward. Next, what thrilling and exciting adventures awaited Kevin?
Whoa! I landed on my face!
No one expected that the group would return to that familiar snowy plain once again, but the timing was still off. Kevin still had not found his parents. However, he encountered an unexpected person here. It was his sister Elsa. Seeing his sister riding a mammoth towards them, Kevin felt like he was dreaming. The next second, he fainted. When he awoke again, he had been taken to a cave dwelling by his sister. From Elsa, Kevin learned that it was now the Ice Age. Thousands of years ago, the residents were Neanderthals. They had been taking care of Elsa, who was from another world. Seeing his sister mingling with the natives, Kevin felt very surprised. He never expected that his sister could learn the language and customs of the Neanderthals in such a short time. She even learned to ride a mammoth. However, Elsa told him that she had been in this era for 3 years. During this time, she had been trying to find the portal entrance, but she had found nothing. Kevin wanted to take Elsa with him, but he was stopped by the chief and other tribespeople. It turned out that they had long regarded Elsa as family, and Elsa had brought fire and advanced inventions. Therefore, they could not do without Elsa. In desperation, Kevin could only temporarily drop the subject. In the evening, the group gathered around the campfire to keep warm. However, not long after, Pello got into an argument with a native. Kevin pulled Elsa away from the crowd. Then he took out 2 pieces of charcoal. He informed Elsa about their parents' situation. To his surprise, she had already met Fiona. However, Kevin still didn't know how to return to the past. Elsa encouraged her brother. She urged him not to give up. Hearing his sister's spirited words, Kevin felt rejuvenated. The two hugged tightly. They promised to find a way to save their parents together. After a long search, the group finally found the entrance to a new portal. Wage confidently stated that this time point was definitely correct. They could return to the night Kevin's parents were murdered, but Pello was very worried, because both God and Fiona were present that night. They were likely to encounter danger upon their return. Just as the thieves group was in heated debate, Elsa had already entered the portal first. Kevin followed closely behind, but he did not expect that. They didn't return to the night of their parents' death. Instead, they went back 30 years. Elsa was very disheartened, because at this time, their parents were still children. However, she quickly lifted her spirits, and decided to split up with Kevin. Each would search for their parents in their youth. Meanwhile, the thieves group was about to enter the time portal, when they discovered they were seeing their future selves, and they could even communicate. This was beyond the thieves' comprehension. Could it be, as Future Wage said, that time and space could be folded? But the group had no clues at the moment, so they temporarily set their questions aside. They stepped into the time portal. However, unexpectedly, Fiona also arrived in the same time period. This time, what wonderful experiences would they encounter again? Kevin and Elsa each found their parents as children. After a brief time together, they had to say goodbye to their parents, because of Fiona's pursuit. Before parting, Kevin told his parents to remember this demon. Then the group hurriedly hid in a roadside shop. But something unbelievable happened. Due to the folding of time and space, there were actually 2 Fionas in this world. The group was immediately despondent. One demon had already worn them out. With 2, they were surely doomed. To buy time for everyone to escape, teammate Billy stepped forward to block Fiona. But unexpectedly, the 2 Fionas began to fight each other first. After a temporary safety, Wage resumed his study of the time map. He wanted to figure out what the time-space folding he mentioned in the future was. But unexpectedly, he actually reopened the time portal, and had a conversation with his Ice Age self. Could this be time-space folding? Without time to ponder, the group returned once again to the Ice Age. Pello suggested that Kevin give up on saving his parents, because none of them knew if they could succeed, and there were many unknown dangers ahead. But at this moment, Kevin suddenly realized that the 2 pieces of charcoal in his backpack had disappeared. After the surprise, he instantly realized that they had successfully changed history. Then the appearance of the Demon King confirmed his thoughts. It turned out that because of Kevin's warning, his parents had been prepared for the impending danger. On that night, 30 years later, they successfully rewrote the outcome of their deaths, but they were captured by the Demon King as a bargaining chip to negotiate with Kevin. As long as he could hand over the map, the Demon King would release his parents. Learning that his parents were still alive, a smile instantly appeared on Kevin's face. Then he decided to go to the demon's lair, the Dark Fortress, to rescue his parents. But the Dark Fortress only existed in myth. Where should they search for it? The next day, the group decided to set off for the mythological age. But unfortunately, the time map was missing a corner, and that part recorded the entrance to the mythological age. So, they had to first find the missing piece. Meanwhile, inside the Heaven base, a rebellion was being plotted. On the other side, Kevin brought the group back to ancient Greece again. He prepared to enter the city, to find the prophetess Cassandra. Perhaps she could help locate the missing piece of the map. Thus, they re-entered the city of Troy. However, at this moment, the city had already been occupied by Greek soldiers, so this group of oddly dressed individuals was thrown into prison as soon as they entered the city. However, this turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because Cassandra was also imprisoned at that time. Kevin asked her where to find the missing piece of the map. She told him to go to the time period where they last saw the complete map. The thieves group recalled that they last saw the complete map before their companion Susan's death. So, the group decided to head to that time period immediately. However, while they were searching for the portal entrance, suddenly, a huge wave surged in the nearby sea. Then, a massive figure slowly emerged from the water. It was Poseidon, the god of the sea in ancient Greece. He wielded a gigantic trident, exuding an air of authority. But as soon as he spoke, he demanded that they return the map. It turned out that this Poseidon was a disguise of God. Kevin tried to seek help from him, asking him to help save his parents. However, the next second, he was pulled into a void by God. God hoped that Kevin could help retrieve the map. In short, he wanted Kevin to become a spy to retrieve the map, while the thieves group was off guard. And God promised to help Kevin fulfill one wish, such as safely returning his parents. Faced with such an enticing offer, would Kevin agree? After he left the void, he found himself with the thieves, and it seemed that no one noticed his odd behavior. After a brief discussion, they set off on their journey again. The next second, they successfully arrived at the time of Susan's death. However, the timing was still wrong. They were a step too late. Susan had already been crushed by a boulder. As the group mourned her, Elsa noticed a shadow near the boulder. After the thieves identified her, it was the deceased Susan, holding a piece of the map. The thieves excitedly called her name, but unexpectedly, Susan turned and left without looking back. She entered a portal not recorded on the map. Could it be that Susan no longer remembered them? The group hurriedly followed her. They arrived in the Qin dynasty, 220 BC. They chased after Susan's footsteps, but unexpectedly, they accidentally trespassed into the territory of the Qin dynasty. They were stopped by Qin Shi Huang's guards. At this time, the Great Wall was just beginning to be built. Crossing it would be deemed an invasion. But Susan had already slipped into the military camp amidst the chaos. Seeing that she was about to escape, Kevin began to flatter Qin Shi Huang. Hearing this, he was delighted. He immediately changed his attitude and agreed to let them pass. So Kevin and the others entered the next time and space through the tent. It was the city of Kaffa in 1343. At this time, the city was experiencing turmoil. The Mongols were throwing the bodies of the plague victims into the city, causing the Black Death to spread throughout Kaffa. The crowded masses scattered the group, and they lost track of Susan. Fortunately, she was also disoriented by the chaos in the city. She appeared once again. The group immediately chased after her. They cornered her in a narrow alley. Pello didn't understand why she was running away. After all, they had stolen the time map together, and decided to use the map to traverse time and space, to become famous time bandits across the universe. But faced with the group's questions, Susan said she didn't want to be a time thief. The reason she tore off a piece of the map was so that they couldn't find her. But unexpectedly, this group still followed her. She warned them again not to follow her. Then she opened the time portal and went in. Watching Susan leave, someone couldn't help but clear their throat to express their feelings, but was overheard by the townspeople. They thought they were infected with the Black Death. Seeing that they were about to be captured and burned, Susan suddenly appeared behind them. She called for them to follow her. The next moment, they arrived at a mysterious island. There was only one house on the island. Elsa guessed that it was Susan's residence, so Pello cautiously approached and knocked on the door. But unexpectedly, the person who opened the door was their missing companion Galen. Why was he living with Susan? It turned out that they were in love with each other, and both were tired of the life of a thief. After all, they hadn't achieved anything since they set out, and had constantly put themselves in dangerous situations, so they faked their deaths and hid on this island. Pello and the others were deeply affected by this. It turned out that in their companions' eyes, they were such failures. But Kevin comforted them, saying that everyone has different pursuits. Although Galen and Susan no longer needed them, he really needed the thieves group's help. The thieves, reassured of their worth, felt revitalized. So they decided to accompany Kevin to the mythological age, to find the Dark Fortress and rescue his parents. At this moment, the ground suddenly began to shake violently. The group hurried to the seaside to check the situation, but they discovered that the island was slowly rising. They were actually on the giant's hat. Learning that this giant loved to help others, Kevin quickly called out for help, hoping he could help rescue their parents. At the siblings' request, the giant agreed to take them to the Dark Fortress. As the giant moved, Tremendous waves surged across the sea. In just a few steps, they arrived at their destination. They stood on the giant's fingers, and were safely transported to the land, where the dark fortress was located. After a long trek, they finally reached the entrance of the fortress. At this moment, the sky was covered with dark clouds. Lava surrounded the fortress. The closer they got to the dark fortress, the more they could feel the terrifying evil power. How could mere mortals safely pass through this perilous land, and successfully enter the fortress? Just as the group was feeling distressed, a demon suddenly flew out of the ancient castle. It landed not far from where Kevin and the others were hiding. It deliberately exposed the entrance to the fortress loudly. Then it turned and left. The group immediately followed. Sure enough, they found the mysterious entrance to the castle. At this point, the thieves said that they could only help up to this point. The rest of the journey could only be undertaken by the siblings together. However, Kevin was not afraid at all, because he had already thought of how to make the Demon King spare his parents. That was to use the power of love to change him. That was indeed a good idea. Hopefully, the Demon King would really fall for it. Before parting, the thieves group handed the time map to Kevin, hoping it would help him, and Kevin promised to return the map in its entirety. Thus, the siblings stepped into the fortress without hesitation. However, the next second, Kevin suddenly found himself back in his bedroom. He hurriedly opened the wardrobe, but there was no time portal in sight. Then, his parents walked into the room. They said that it was all just a dream. He had never traveled through time. However, Kevin didn't believe it at all, because his parents seemed too unusual. Not only were they very interested in history, but they also referred to Elsa as his sister. Kevin suddenly realized that the parents in front of him must be fake, so he quickly put on the translation helmet. As expected, the people in front of him instantly transformed into two demons. Kevin successfully freed himself from the illusion. At this point, he had walked to the edge of the fortress window. Fortunately, Elsa pulled him back in time, preventing him from falling into the lava. Then, they saw their parents tied up. Kevin pleaded with the Demon King to spare them, but the Demon King demanded that he trade the map for them. Kevin firmly refused upon hearing this. He had promised Pello that he would return the time map intact, but at this moment, the thieves group was also captured by Fianna, and brought into the fortress. Seeing that they were all in place, the Demon King once again demanded that Kevin hand over the map. At this point, he was still able to speak politely, but Kevin still refused. So the Demon King decided to directly use magic to seize it. But unexpectedly, he couldn't take the time map at all. Pello kindly explained that God had set up an anti-theft system on the map specifically for demons. Only if they willingly gave the map to the Demon King. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to forcibly take it. So the Demon King immediately resorted to threats and temptations against them. As long as they handed over the map, they would receive their heart's greatest desires. The thieves were thrilled by this, and really considered trading the map. Kevin quickly stopped them, and stated that he would return the map to God. However, the Demon King mocked him for being naive, because what God wanted to do was no different from what the demons did. The Demon King wanted to use the map to create a wicked world, while God aimed to use the map for a great cleansing of the earth, to return everything to its original starting point. This was no different from destroying the world. Then, the Demon King couldn't be bothered to say more nonsense, and directly resorted to torture against the thieves and Elsa, pressuring Kevin to hand over the map. At this moment, a loud explosion suddenly echoed from outside the hall. Then God slowly emerged from the smoke. He unleashed several bolts of lightning within the hall. This unique entrance even made the Demon King unable to resist commenting. However, God completely ignored him. After all, his true objective was the time map, but he also wouldn't forcibly seize it. However, the Demon King reminded Kevin again that God wanted to destroy all of humanity. After a moment of thought, Kevin asked the Demon King to first send Fianna away, and then send his parents back home. After the Demon King complied with his request, Kevin expressed his views. He couldn't agree with God's universe reset plan. Although during this fantastical journey through time, he witnessed countless deaths and misfortunes, but he also experienced many beautiful things and emotions. Simply starting over again is not advisable. The world can't be built and developed solely according to God's will. Upon hearing this, the Demon King immediately seized the opportunity to say, if he got the map, although the world would turn into a hell, he would certainly preserve human history and civilization. Seeing that Kevin seemed genuinely tempted, Pello immediately stepped forward to stop him. Although she also hated God's tyranny, the world could not fall into the hands of demons for that reason. However, Kevin had already made his decision. In the incredulous eyes of the crowd, he handed the box containing the map to the Demon King. After receiving the box, The Demon King immediately excitedly set off fireworks. The wicked have won, so of course he should celebrate well. At this moment, God couldn't believe he had lost to the Demon King, so he reluctantly wanted to forcibly seize the map. But the Dark Fortress was the demon's territory. God's powers were ineffective here. While the two were setting off fireworks, Kevin and the others hurriedly escaped from the fortress. After confirming their safety, Kevin took out the real map from his backpack. It turned out he had swapped the map a long time ago, because it was the blueprint of the universe. It should not belong to any one party. What the Demon King received was just a self-portrait of Kevin. Listening to the roars coming from the fortress in the distance, Kevin smiled knowingly. Who would have thought that God and the Demon King would be outsmarted by a kid? Kevin returned the map to the thieves group, but unexpectedly, the box contained a damaged piece of paper. So where was the real-time map? Perhaps the answer lay in the journey ahead. Thus, the entire story comes to an end. Overall, the entire show is a blend of fantastical beauty and thrilling adventure. The plot seems whimsical and far-fetched, but is actually vibrant and profoundly meaningful. Through this fantastical adventure, Kevin gradually escapes the confusion and loneliness of childhood, becoming more determined and brave. And the audience also experiences a journey through time and space interwoven with fantasy and childhood innocence. Friends who are interested can watch the original film Time Bandits. If you like my channel, please click to subscribe.